Welcome, everyone. My name is Richard Spellacy, and I'm the Registrar for the College of Alberta Psychologists. I'm very pleased to start off this presentation on the examination for professional practice in psychology, parts 1 and 2. Prior to introducing our speakers for today, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. It is with respect and in the spirit of reconciliation and truth, the College of Alberta Psychologists honor and acknowledge that here in Alberta, treaties 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, as well as many unsigned treaties, encompass the traditional and ancestral territories of many diverse Indigenous peoples, namely the Kainai, the Kainai, Siksika, Cree, Deni, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Stoney Nakoda, Tsuut'ina, Inuit, and the Métis Nation. We acknowledge and give many thanks to these First Nations and Inuit peoples who have lived and cared for these lands for generations, and the many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. We are dedicated to ensuring the spirit of all treaties are honored and respected. We make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those on whose territory we reside or which we visit. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the speakers for today's presentation. Mariann Burnetti-Atwell is the ASPPB Chief Executive Officer for the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. Before assuming this position, Dr. Burnetti-Atwell served as the Senior Vice President of Behavioral Health Services for the National Correctional Healthcare Company, Corazon Health. For the 15 years prior to that role, Dr. Burnetti-Atwell provided behavioral and health administrative leadership to the state of Missouri in a variety of leadership roles within the Departments of Corrections and Social Services. In addition, she served on the Missouri State Committee of Psychologists through appointments of 2 Missouri governors. Hao Song is the ASPPB Associate Executive Officer of Examination Services. Before assuming this position, Dr. Song directed the psychometrics and research teams in multiple national medical certification and licensing boards. Dr. Song is a credential assessment leader with extensive experience in the design, development, administration, and analysis and evaluation of large-scale professional licensing and certification programs. She is also an accomplished researcher in test validation, fairness, diagnostic score reporting, test innovations, and quality improvement. Welcome, Dr. Song and Dr. Burnetti-Atwell.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon. I know everybody may be coming from just a little different place, but I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to come before you all today. It's a great opportunity to be able to share some information in regards to the exam, but also gives an opportunity for us to listen to questions, listen to concerns. And we are just always happy to have these opportunities to bring information forward. So what we have for you today is we have a presentation. It's about 28 slides. We would like to go through the presentation. It's going to highlight various aspects about the exam and the development of the exam and some of the information, both positive and negative, that has been really flowing through many conversations for some time and just recently also. I think that the message that I really hope to leave you with is that this is not a stale process. This is a process that continues to require attention and continues to require oversight, adjustment, enhancement. So test development is never over. It's never completed. It's really a process that we look to improve and to enhance at every step of the game. Dr. Song, would you like to say a few words?
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. As Dr. Burnetti-Atwell says, we really appreciate this time to share some of the process we have been used in develop this EPPP examination, and also we are here to listen to you to see to hear what your concerns, and we will incorporate your feedback into the continuous quality improvement of our product. Really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Just before you begin, I just wanted to highlight that today's moderator is Dr. Troy Jansen, and he will be moderating the chat box and presenting questions to the panel when it's appropriate. And of course, at the end of the presentation, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. So welcome, Dr. Jansen.
Wonderful. So why don't we go ahead and get started then? So we want to go ahead and just really kind of start with a bit of a foundation. The Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards is an organization that serves 65 members. Those are the licensing boards and colleges throughout the United States and Canada. And in this role, we are really here to assist the boards and colleges in their mandate to look to public safety for those consumers of care, and to ensure that those individuals who are being licensed are competent to practice independently or in some jurisdictions under supervision. So the EPPP was originally created in 1965 as a standardized exam with a focus of really looking at assessing foundational knowledge. And for those individuals who were just getting ready to enter the field of practice. By the mid-'80s, the EPPP was adopted by the 65 jurisdictions. In addition to the EPPP in its early development, the boards and colleges often assess skills of the candidates for licensure in a variety of ways. There has really not been a consistent standard across the jurisdictions. So this is included, as this says, supervisor ratings, counting of hours, and oral exams. And with each of these areas, there's a great variation that has a tendency to occur. So the EPPP revision. Over the years, the membership of ASPPB in combination with the association supported a revision to the exam that would further enhance the exam to move into more of a competency exam that would give a more global assessment of not only knowledge but skills. And if we look at that definition of competency, it really takes into a holistic approach for the assessment of individuals to be able to ensure that they are at a place to have what is necessary to practice. And so for more than 15 years, ASPPB has been evaluating this need, and through the revision of the EPPP, moving it into a competency-based exam, so it would focus on assessing both skills and knowledge in combination. So as we look at the revised EPPP and the implementation of that, the Part 2 skills exam was launched as a live exam in August of 2021. Right now, there are approximately 7 jurisdictions that are utilizing the Part 2. And beginning in January 26, the revised EPPP will be delivered in a two-part exam. With this decision, many jurisdictions are considering an early entry option. And what that is meaning, it's different for every jurisdiction. And they're looking at encouraging the students to take that Part 1 knowledge right after the coursework is completed. And then looking at the 2 being more appropriate at the point of licensure. So as we work through really the majority of this presentation, we really want to focus significantly on those myths and facts that have been swirling around the exam. As you are aware, there have been numerous negative narratives, and there's actually been some misinformation about the exam that has been shared in a variety of pockets. So really, we come today just wanting to bring the information to you from us and give you really a view on what we are doing to be very responsible in these activities, and maybe provide you with just a little different information than maybe what you've heard to date. So we will be addressing a couple of common concerns and provide a little more factual information around why is the EPPP Part 2 skills even needed? Also, how can we be assured that the exam is valid? And is the EPPP biased, as some have claimed? And what about the cost and perceived barriers associated with an additional assessment? These seem to be the 4 themes that seem to be discussed, seem to be presented to us, and seem to be the conversations that we hear individuals, professionals, students are having, and definitely conversations that we've been in. So moving along, the need for a competency-based exam. So why develop the 2? Well, as I mentioned, the 1 is really strictly a foundational knowledge exam. And we've had some criticisms, not only we, but some jurisdictions have had criticisms for it not assessing skills. Many professions have moved towards utilizing a competency-based exam at the time of licensing. And unfortunately, psychology has been a little bit of an outlier and compared to other healthcare disciplines as for not having a standardized exam. So the assessment of clinical skills right now, as I mentioned earlier, seems to vary widely across jurisdictions, with that area of knowledge, that area of skill development being assessed very, very differently. So why the EPPP Part 2 skills is important? Well, 1, the skills are not universally assessed in a standardized manner. 2, most current competency assessment methods have known concerns. Again, that goes back to, even though the hours are very tangible when individuals report the hours that they've completed, sometimes supervisor ratings have been plagued with less than valid or accurate information. We've heard scenarios where, you know, the majority of those supervisor ratings that get in front of the licensure boards and colleges speak highly to everybody. And there tends to be, it's very subjective and difficult to really be able to get a good concrete foundation on exactly where an individual might have been. We've also been in conversation with APPP, who is the association that oversees postdoctoral and internships. And they have been seeing a significant decrease in competency of individuals in their internships. They are receiving more calls for consultations, and there have been approximately about 150 individuals that have actually failed their internships because they have not had the skills necessary to successfully complete that year, that 2-year period. And we also are wondering, what impacts are COVID going to have? Again, as we look at some of the supervision, as we look at some of the transition that's happened to be able to continue with the training, we're still needing to see what that's going to look like. Also, some research has also supported that about 77% of psychology students report problems with professional competency with their peers. There's also been research that has indicated that training directors agree that a significant majority of candidates are not ready to practice upon receipt of the degree. And we also have learned that training directors have shared that they believe approximately about 3,400 training hours are needed for licensure. But we have seen in some jurisdictions, they've decided to do away with postdoc training requirements. So again, when you look at those, the requirement of the licensing boards and colleges for public protection and that need to ensure that consumers of care are receiving ethical, competent treatment, you can see why these issues can cause some concern. So we're going to move now into established validity. Dr. Song.
Thank you, Dr. So validity, that's a very important for this high stake kind of a multi jurisdiction licensure exam. So we established the EPPP validity mainly on the content. We have kind of we called it a validity trail to establish the validity. So from select the people involved. These are from thousands of volunteers. They are subject matter experts in the psychology content areas. So they were involved in planning, design, development, review of the exam. So the first step is to survey all psychologists in practice, what they are doing in their job, what knowledge, what skills they need. So we called it job task analysis. So the representative panel established a job task analysis survey and send out the survey to all people who are practicing. And based on their feedback, we kind of decide what content areas to include in the exam and also their distribution. That's called test specifications. You may also hear exam blueprint. And then after this kind of a framework of the exam is established, we have a kind of involved another like thousands of SMEs, subject matter experts in developing those questions, write those questions. And those questions, believe it or not, from the first time it's drafted to reviewed, multi-level reviewed, and then to pre-test before they become part of your actual exam score, it can take 2 to 3 years. And then after they are on the exam, so we have a series of a psychometric evaluation to make sure they are testing as what they intend to test, and also can have reasonable difficulty. Not everybody get it right or not everybody get it wrong. Those are too hard, too easy, are not performing well, and also they discriminating people from high ability to low ability, all kinds of psychometric quality matrix. And then also like how do we decide people who are passing the exam? We have another kind of a very important process called standard setting. So these standards are set by representative psychologists, and their collective wisdom decide this criteria referenced standard. It's not we will pass 80% of people. It's based on a standard. So these people who passed will practice safely to protect the public. So these are the very rigorous systematic process to establish the validity of our exam. And definitely these are follow the highest kind of a testing standard, like the standard established by American Psychology Association, American Educational Research Association, and the National Council of Measurement in Education. So these are the kind of the highest testing standard we are following to put together this examination. So why not other validation strategy? Some people saying you should predict who are going to be a good psychologist or who are not. That's not the purpose of the examination. So when we talk about this is valid, we kind of saying the inferences based on this examination can be defended. So that's called validation. So we're not predicting who are going to be good psychologists, because different people have a different criteria. So that's not the purpose of the licensure examination. You will see in the next slides. So, and also the purpose is to kind of demonstrate the minimum competence to enter into independent or supervised practice. That's the purpose of our examination. So like the driver's license or doctor comprehensive examination, once you pass the driver license examination, you can drive, but doesn't mean you will never have a car accident, right? So that's kind of what EPPP is performing. So make sure you know the road rules, and you know how to drive your car, and parallel parking, all kinds of minimum required competence. But we will never predict you will have car accident or not. That's not the purpose of our exam, same as a driver's license. And then because the purpose of this examination, so we are not saying we predict your performance, because performance will have many other factors in as we all know, right? Next one. So as I said, the joint standard of APA, AERA, and CME clearly said that for a licensure examination, criterion related evidence is not applicable, because the reason I explained previously. We just want to make sure people has the kind of a minimum competence to practice, but in terms of whether they will be a very popular psychologist or just a regular psychologist, that's okay, as long as they do not harm patient, right? Okay, next one. So our exams, in addition to this highest testing standard, we are also kind of follow the best practice and even kind of validated by some of the jurisdiction like California. So California Office of Professional Examination Services, OPIS, they have an independent review of EPPP. And they said both Part 1 and Part 2 met professional guidelines and also met California's business and professions code. So this kind of external independent review of EPPP really kind of endorse the validity of this exam is designed to serve. And also it says they are very impressed by part 2, both by the concept of measuring skills, like Dr. Burnetti-Atwell said, it's kind of we try to provide a standardized universal tool to measure skills as individual jurisdictions have been doing. So this part 2 kind of it's come up as your needs to have this new tool. And also they do have a new item type to thoroughly access these skills, not those traditional kind of relative low reliability oral exams or program director ratings, because they varied so much and pretty subjective. So this is a EPPP Part 2 skills provide a standardized and more objective assessment tools.
Also, in kind of following what Dr. Song has shared about an external review, the ASPPB Board of Directors really wanted to create another avenue for external involvement, external review of the test development process. So the board established what we call the ESTAG, the Examination Stakeholders Technical Advisory Group. This is a group of about 11 individuals who pretty much are outside of the association. The majority of these members come from the training and education community. They come from the applied training community. They come from licensure, certification community, and assessment representative. And so this group has really been tasked with bringing their thoughts, bringing their comments, looking at the development of this exam and looking at ways that we can do further research about the EPPP, and also to listen to what others are saying about the exam. As many of you on this call, if not most of you on this call, know that there have been varying comments about the development of the exam, and the training and education community has been very verbal about their thoughts of the exam. And frankly, it's been really good to hear from them, because I think every comment definitely helps in this process to assess and reassess the development that goes into establishing these high stakes exams. And so the ESTAG is working very hard. They provided recommendations to our board that the board has supported. And so the work of the group will be looking at areas for research, but also another area they looked at was just communications and how we communicate. So we have many efforts underway right now looking at both of those areas. Concerns about potential bias. Dr. Song?
Okay, thank you. So first I want to say one of the kind of argument or claim people think EPPP is biased is because they see some differential performance for people with different cultural or demographic backgrounds. I want to point out differential performance doesn't mean bias. As I said, in this standard I keep referring to is bias refers to the thing here we refer to construct measured by the exam either is irrelevant or underrepresent the intended construct. So that is the definition of bias. So based on this, kind of a different performance doesn't mean kind of a directly equals to bias. Unless we really saying what we are measuring is not what intend to measure. So that can cause some bias to certain group of people, right? So, but the people kind of a general audience may not know this clearly, so they sometimes refer to articles saying, oh, they see differential performance by different groups, and then directly jump into that means our exam is biased. Not true. Okay, we want to be very clear here. And as we all know, the different performances can be resulted from many factors, can be from people's training. We all know people from accredited program definitely perform much better than from non-accredited programs, and people from whether they are first generation college students or whether they have kind of different numbers of training hours, those can be all kind of contribute to the different performance. Recently, I look at people who took the practice exam or the sample exams we provided versus not. Believe it or not, the difference can be 20% in passing rate. Those who took the sample exam or practice exam, they did much better, and the differences between their demographics can be reversed. Next one. So in terms of as a developer of the exam, we try our best, in addition to those kind of try to understand what other factors can cause this differential performances. But as a exam provider, we did try on our end from the development stage. First, as I said, we invite a representative group of subject matter experts and provide training in writing these questions, and including those training on implicit bias. So to avoid certain languages, certain way of presenting the questions. So that's the general part. And then next one. Like I said, I may mention the different committees on the next couple slides, but definitely every questions from being written, they went through multiple levels of reviews to make sure they do not have those potential bias, kind of potential maybe cause biased language. So, and if they are, they were revised before they can even put on the exam to be the field test, to be field tested. And then after field test, every item need to be reviewed again, both content in terms of we also collect candidate feedback to see whether this questions is clear or it's confusing, or some of the terms may be updated, those things. And also we look at the statistics saying, as I said, whether they are appropriate difficulty level, discriminating well between high ability, low ability, all these things. And we also have a specific procedure called differential item functioning to control people overall ability, but look at those items flagged for significant different performance between groups, all kinds of groups, gender, age, ethnicities, to make sure these items are reviewed. So next slides. So as I said, we have item development committee to write and review items. We have exam committees review all these good quality items to put together an exam form. Every exam is a snapshot of people's ability. So we want to make sure these sets of items follow the exam specification, as I mentioned previously, and also they are good quality items. And then the next one is, next slides. We also has this special kind of exam item review committee that review those items, went through the diff analysis, differential item functioning analysis, and flagged, showed differential performance. But I want to point out here, once you hear differential performance, you cannot assume those items always kind of favor one group. Mainly, we use like a Caucasian as the reference group. Those flagged diff items, they are not only one way, always favor the Caucasian group. No, they are both ways. Some items may favor Caucasian, some items may favor minority groups, some may favor women, some may favor men. So we saw items kind of showed diff both ways, but no matter which directions, those items are reviewed by the item review committee. So this is also a special kind of a committee formed by representative volunteer groups selected from close to 200 volunteers. They conduct the independent review. So far, we have looked at over 1,300 items. Only like 32 items are flagged to show kind of a significant differences between groups. And then the item review committee look at those items. Only 7 items are removed from future use because of potential wording concerns. You can see so how rigorous process we are as an item, as an exam developer, try to kind of prevent potential bias or concerns. So the next slides just to say this item review committee concludes. So we did our kind of due diligence and to make sure to prevent any potential bias. So so far, very few items, very few, and this is a continuous. So we are going to continue doing this every kind of 6 months. When we evaluate the administration, we do this. So this is a continuous iterative process to improve and enhance our examination.
Dr. Song, may I want to ask one question of you just to make sure that I'm clear too, because my understanding is that each item just isn't reviewed once. Each item is constantly being monitored for any differential functioning. So it's not just a one and done for any item. It's constant review. Would that be correct?
Correct. Correct. And every item kind of before from the big they are written till their final use on the exam can take 2 years. And even after that, they are constantly being reviewed. So the reason exam cost so much is because these kind of continuous quality. Yeah, so some items, if after certain time of use, they are not functioning as they intend to, they are retired. So yeah, it's a continuous process. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So understanding the cost associated with a competency-based exam, this has been an area that ASPPB has been very interested in paying attention to. And a number of the concerns that have come up about this has been related to the student debt and the rising reality of this, and just the overwhelming impact that debt has on students. The additional cost is viewed as a barrier. Extending time to licensure for a skills assessment has been considered a barrier. And the associated costs contributing to the perception of ASP being greedy, despite our not-for-profit status. So, these are 4 very important areas and 4 very important comments. And I think that the board of directors has really been very sensitive to look at each one of these in their decision making. And again, looking at the mission to assist in serving the boards and colleges with their mandate responsibility. So we have really tried to blend and to help address some of these concerns with some of our actions. And some of those actions have been the reduced costs for the Part 2. The Part 2 was a much higher cost when it was first being discussed and initiated. However, the board recognized the fact that there was great concern about that. So the cost for the test has been changed. It's $300 right now and $450 coming August of 2023. Sample exams, the board really wanted to, they spent some time in 2020 really looking at access, equity, being able to really open up the ability for individuals to access these tools. And so in 2020, they chose to significantly reduce the cost of those sample tests. And in regards to the EPPP Part 2, a sample exam is coming online and should be accessible this month. So as Dr. Song had said, we have seen some great positive outcomes for individuals who take those sample exams. And I think it's not so much the passing. I think it's really what's most important is that experience, that ability to kind of see what to expect when you get into the exam itself. And I think that's very important to give people that ability and to hopefully reduce some of that worry, some of that anxiety. Also with the Part 2, it's possible that there could be some consideration by jurisdictions. I am sorry, they're mowing outside my room. I am so sorry if that's a nuisance to you all. I apologize. To be considered to replace maybe current jurisdictional skills or oral exams. We know every jurisdiction does something just a little different. So as your jurisdiction is looking at this exam, as it's looking at its practices, I'm sure that you'll be hearing more from your jurisdiction, your college. And also with the 2, there is the idea of early admission option for that Part 1, as I mentioned lightly earlier, about really having individuals access that knowledge part a little earlier. And we really feel that that should possibly help reduce reliance on maybe some excessive external tools and study preps. And we could see the increase in pass rates because it's going to really reduce that gap between that knowledge acquisition and going on off to that internship, that postdoc. And it possibly with that timing could help with that cost and when that comes in. And it also allows for time to maybe remediate in an area that might need additional acquisition of knowledge, acquisition of skills, and to also help with that area also. So in conclusion, we'd really like to just spotlight the fact that, you know, the revised exam is coming about through the work and the information gathered from thousands of psychologists who completed the job task analysis, identifying what knowledge, what skills are necessary for an entry-level individual to begin practice in the field. And allowing that to help the licensing boards and colleges as they make decisions about licensing individuals that are coming before them. It's also an opportunity to provide a standard, objective, defensible exam to assess that competency-based model. And ASPPB is just very committed to continue through our mission to serve our members, to partner with our member jurisdictions, to assist them with their mandate to responsibly license competent people. We would hope that everybody that comes before is competent. We really, really hope that. Having sat on a licensure board in my past life for about 8 years, and now having an opportunity to see discipline that happens throughout North America, you know, things happen. And unfortunately, victims occur. And so with this, we hope this information has been helpful. We really want to now open it up and to be available for any comments or questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for both of your very informative presentation. And I can report that there have been a few questions that have been posted to both the chat room and as well as to the Q&A portion. And if anyone has any questions as we start addressing some of the questions, you know, you can certainly still add them, and I'm monitoring those. The first question I just thought I'd pose to you, and I think you've kind of already addressed some of this in discussing you know, how ASPPB determines and makes sure that items don't have any sort of biases against any known groups. And some have noted that they've noticed that that in the examination itself there might be some questions asking exam takers to identify certain demographic variables. And I was just wondering if either of you would be willing to sort of speak to why that's important to ask those questions. Pardon me as I choke. But why it's important to ask those questions and sort of answering the question of why a bias in such an exam.
I can try first, because as we know, yeah, some of our peer exam, they do want to look at people's performance from different background. So ASPPB have not collected that until recently. So we make it the survey question, post-exam survey, ask those. The reason we ask at the end of the examination is try to not distracting people, right? But if there's any other source other than the current route, we will definitely consider that. because we do want to kind of look at to incorporate this into our exam development, like I mentioned, to run those differential item functioning analysis, we need to gather some information. But as I can assure you, assure all the audience, these have nothing to do with your performance. We only connect that for some background for quality improvement of our examination, but never kind of related to your performance. Yeah, everybody apply to the same standard the standard setting panel established. Okay, no matter what language you speak, what gender group you're from, your passing and fail is only based on the standard established.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. So as a follow-up to that, there have been some questions about exactly what sort of demographic information does ASPPB consider in this? You mentioned mainly gender and ethnicity. There was some specific questions about, are things like sexual identity or other sort of diversity issues, neurodiversity, such as learning disabilities, or any of those sorts of issues like ADHD or any other kind of neurodiverse presentation of an exam taker. And just curious about what sorts of variables do you consider?
In terms of a diff analysis, we are using, as you mentioned, gender, ethnicity, race, ethnicity groups. But in terms of the disability or neurodivergent, if they need accommodation, they can definitely apply for separate room or additional time or other accommodation to help kind of make sure they have the equal access to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. So that's a separate consideration. That's but in terms of differential functioning analysis right now is mainly based on the demographic characteristics.
And if I could add, and Dr. Spellacy, I might need your help with this. From an accommodations perspective, I believe those come to you first.
That's
for
correct.
review, and then they would in turn then come to ASPPB. So I just wanted to mention kind of that flow.
That's correct, Mariann. All accommodation requests come to me that are of significance. Now, our examination coordinator, Sherry, may handle some, but certainly we work with ASPPB to make the most of the accommodations available at the test centers.
Excellent. And I believe we really recognize the need to address those, and we are very very quick to not ask any I think not ask questions that would put a barrier up or to have to go through extra significant proof. We really want to reduce any additional trauma, any additional distress on anybody who is needing such an accommodation.
Correct. Usually it's a simple letter from a medical provider or another health regulated member. And it's a very quick process. And then there might be a bit of a scheduling issue because those special rooms may not always be available, but usually it does not delay the process significantly. And it's a very collaborative approach with ASPPB and the test centers.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for those answers. One question came up around validity, and just thought I'd see if you would like to try to help address that. Now, of course, you're talking to an audience that's from a Canadian context, and so one question did come up about noting the difference between American Code of Ethics and slight variation in Canadian Code of Ethics. And their question is, how do we ensure is that a valid, assessment of ethics in a Canadian context? So I wouldn't mind I'm not sure who would be best to address that question, and see if you'd like to answer that.
I can try. So as I said, our kind of item writing committee, exam committee, they include both US and Canadian subject matter experts. So in review those questions, they did make sure they are compliant with both US and Canadian codes of ethics.
I would agree. I was just going to say we have about, on the item writer level, we have about 200 item writers, and they all go through training on various levels, as Dr. Song has already shared. But we try to be very mindful of the nuances within Canada, the nuances within the United States, and making sure that those questions within the exam are appropriate to avoid confusion or to avoid being one-sided.
Thank you for that answer. I would actually even echo that in the development of the Canadian Code of Ethics for Psychologists in Canada, that's largely a lot of the work was done in comparing and using sort of the same foundational principles that are inherent in both codes. And so there's a lot of overlap between the two codes. There's probably more similarities than differences amongst our Code of Ethics is perhaps something that to maybe also note. There are some questions that are really more for the regulator here, that there's some that are querying when will the part 2, and you've already noted that as of January of 2026, I think it was, that there will no longer be any choice in the matter. I believe the College of Alberta Psychologists has already announced that to all of our members, but some may not have gotten that notice that as of that date, is it end of January, beginning of January, like January 1? Can you just clarify the date, whoever has that information?
It's January 1st, Troy.
Okay. So that at that point, it will become mandatory as part of part 1 and part 2. One question I had that I thought I anticipated that there might be amongst those who are listening today is, if you've done part 1 and passed it, will you be required to do part 2? Is I think a common question. And why would you consider doing part 2 from a mobility perspective, even in going from a jurisdiction where it's required to have both parts? And I'm not sure if ASPB would like to address that question, but certainly as a regulator, we can address what we think about that as well.
Go ahead, Mariann.
Well, I think you know what I'm going to say. I believe that this is going to be your decision on how you address that situation going forward with this transition in 2026. We will work with you. We are already looking at a variety of scenarios that we will bring back to the jurisdictions to try to get a uniform way for everybody to approach that. But it ultimately, that decision rests with you, the college.
Do you have anything to add to that, Richard, or is there?
No, not really. That is correct. The reason why one may wish to write part 2 is if they're going to a jurisdiction who was requiring part 2. We are going to not make part 2 mandatory until all of our members have to take part 2, and new members. But our existing members will not have to take part 2. Those who have not passed part 1 by January 1st, 2026 will have to take both parts of the examination.
Thank you. So some students might have a perception on the reasons for pass or differential pass or fail rates depending on jurisdiction. And I've actually done an article on this, and when I first came to the college in 2017, so I'd refer our members to an article I wrote in 2017 on pass and fail rates and some of what we discovered internally about that. But there was a bit of I think, a mistaken perception that the difference in content between American and Canadian content might account for difference in pass and fail rates. And I wonder if you might be able to kind of comment on what you believe might be the most salient reasons why you might see differences in pass and fail rates across jurisdictions.
I would say, because I'm pretty new to ASPPB, so I'm looking at this, and also I have the fortune to kind of look at the recent 6 years data. The two things I saw, the different performance. One is whether students from the accredited program versus not. They are clearly sizable differences in terms of performance. The other is when I look at the 2017 through 2022 compared to prior 2016 data, I see some differences. So given we all went through this kind of a past 3 year with COVID pandemic, I break this 6 years into 2, 2017 through 2019, and then 2020 through 2022. I find where the difference is from, as you know, right? The recent 3 years definitely has a drop in performance. So I would say the different performance, as an outsider, I've been here only 2 months. One is from accredited program versus not. And the other is like the COVID, as Mariann mentioned, we will continue monitor the impact on training. But based on the EPPP data, I can see this recent 3 years had a negative impact on student performance.
Thank you. Yeah, I think those are really great answers. And so, you know, in my own look at this, there were some publications, including by I think some authors at ASPPB, when I looked at the issue, I looked at it, variables like study time, program wasn't, you know, whether they came from accredited program, PsyD program, master's level training, which is the case in this context that we, you can begin licensure in Alberta beginning at a master's. So when you look at the difference in pass rates, level of preparation and training, that's a significantly predictive variable in terms of that. You know, apart from that, there was very few other, you know, salient variables that I saw that really looked at, you know, that kind of thing. And the study time was sort of variable in terms of how much is recommended. If you survey students, they say as much as 500 hours in some cases. And I like what's an appropriate amount of time to prepare might depend on your educational preparation beforehand, a number of what kind of study materials you have access to. And there were some questions about what are the recommendations around these sorts of things? How should I best prepare? Where are the best places to find sources to study and prepare for, so I'm more likely to pass? I wonder if either of you have some friendly suggestions in that regard.
I think Dr. Song had mentioned that there was some significant pluses in doing the sample exam. So from the ASPPB tools, I think it's important to look at that. I think it's also important to equate oneself with the candidate handbook, because I think that candidate handbook, which is available on the website at ASPPB.net, I think that's a very good tool to start that education, start that prepping of just the whole concept of the exam. There are a couple of other items on the website, some sample questions. There's also FAQs about the exam. So I think from our world, those are things that we've kind of put into play. We have not partnered with third-party test developers, because frankly, it really feels like a conflict of interest. And so in regards to a specific entity, I don't know that we're able to really, I don't know that we know that, to be honest with you. And it's not a piece of data that we've collected. So I apologize for not being able to provide more guidance in that area.
That's no problem. There's a wide range and a wide host of information. I believe that our fraternal association has recommended places as well, and even offers preparation workshops, etc., for people that are still planning to take the exam, and so that they can prepare. The last variable I forgot to mention earlier was how soon after your graduate program do you take the test actually is predictive of pass and failure rates. Then that the sooner you take it after your education, the more likely you are to pass, versus the longer you wait, the less likely. Is that bearing out with what you know?
Yes, I think that's very true for what we know.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And the reason that's important, I think, is that we are, I think that as a college, we can maybe contemplate even, the idea that maybe as a graduate student, if they're, finding ways to allow them as a graduate student to gain application status with the college so they can take that exam as early as possible, may be an advantage to some of our members that are attempting that exam, because it's still fresh in their mind. They're in the study mode and mentality. And so those are some of the things that I know that the college is looking at. A number of the questions that did arise were really more for the regulator. And so I'll turn these questions for Richard to answer. We've recently made a shift in Alberta to limit the number of attempts to only 3 attempts, with one ability to apply for an extension beyond that potentially. But some are asking for a rationale and things like that, Richard. So I thought I'd just turn that question to you on what that decision is based on, and why that's happening, and when that shift happens. I think it's already in place, but I think it'd be important to reinforce that for those who are participating today.
Yes, that shift has already taken place. January 1st, individuals will only be allowed 3 more attempts to write the EPPP. There are a number of reasons for that. For one, there are only limited versions of the EPPP, and certainly we don't want situations where there have been in the past where people have taken it more than 10 times. We also think that consistent with other regulatory bodies and other fields, law, medicine, there are limits to the number of times you can take the entry to practice examination. So we think that 3 is a fair limit. And I think, Troy, your own research bore out that after 3 consecutive failures, the likelihood of passing is not that high. And then we do have one extra appeal a person can make to get a 4th attempt if they have some unique grounds, such as it may be ESL, it may be they've suffered some particular significant losses or stresses in their life, and they can apply for a 4th writing. but we really do think that the public expects that our members will have a minimum number of foundational knowledge, and that there comes a point where no other profession would allow a person to be practicing for this for more than a reasonable time without passing their entry to practice examination. So what I'm saying about that is law has limits, medicine has limits, and we really think the public expects us to ensure that those individuals who are practicing, such as provisional psychologists have that foundational knowledge in order to provide safe, effective services. So yes, there are limits. We think there are reasonable limits. We do have allowed some room for those who need maybe an extra attempt due to some particular unique circumstances. But we feel that this is a sign of a mature profession, having these minimum expectations for the profession.
Thank you for that, Richard. Just in looking at the remaining questions, I think that a vast majority of these questions have already been answered. And I think that there's not too many additional questions. Some had asked for where I mentioned an article. I'll have to take a look in the CAP monitor. It is in the one of the CAP monitors that I wrote an article on EPPP pass rates back in the day that sort of explained the Alberta pass rates and what we had learned, which was something our council had wondered about at the time, and that we had quite different pass rates compared to other jurisdictions. And the large answer is that it was primarily on the entry level to practice difference of master's level entry, and that when we look at PhD students taking that exam, that our pass rates are similar to other jurisdictions in the world where that is the standard. And it just shows that since it's a broad knowledge exam, you need a lot of academic and other preparation sort of to be prepared to get past an exam that is as rigorous as this type of exam. Now, the skills exam is a new entity for many, and in terms of how one has to prepare for that and what we're learning is sort of the next question. You have several jurisdictions who've already signed on to the skills-based component, and my wonder is, what are we learning in the preliminary uptake from jurisdictions who've adopted the skills exam? Are we learning that it's fairly similar in results to what we know from the EPPP Part 1, this knowledge part? Or is there some substantially different things? Are they learning things about what the preparation is going to be? Are pass rates similar? Things like that.
Great question. Thank you for this question. In terms of prepare for Part 2, we are having a sample exam coming out. As we mentioned earlier, the sample exam is one great tool to help people familiarize with the format, with the content of the exam. So very cost effective, because I did hear from people saying they paid 3,000 test prep materials, but still didn't pass. My response to them is take sample exam, because that costs you $30 or $80 to $50, and we see dramatic improvement in EPPP performance for those who took the sample exam versus not. And the sample exam for Part 2 and will be out later this month. And in terms of Part 2 statistics, up till yesterday, I just looked at, we have close to 260 Part 2 takers. Their passing rate, the first attempt passing rate is comparable with Part 1. in terms of overall passing rate is higher because believe it or not, the part 2 takers, they are more coherent compared to part 1. The main performance differences are not much from part 1, but they are more kind of standard deviation is smaller. So not many people really need to take it 2 or 3 times to pass part 2. So the overall passing rate based on this 250 plus people, their passing rate is higher than part 1. In terms of how they relate to part 1, as we hoped, they are moderately high positive correlation. So people who performed well on part 1 in their first attempt, I did traced close to 200 out of this 250 plus people, their first attempt part 1 score. So very fresh out of press results is these part 1 and part 2 performance are moderately higher correlated. So about close to 30% of variance of part 1 can be explained, or part 2 can be explained by their part 1 performance. So kind of 75% of this close to 200 people, they passed first attempt or failed first attempt, also pass and fail part 2, but another 25%, they have different performance. So the moderately highly correlated. That's, I think, kind of another validation of part 2. They are measuring something different from part 1, but also correlated with part 1. So they complement each other, make the EPPP a good 2-part examination.
Thank you, Hal. And one of the things I wanted just to point out, Dr. Jansen, is that with the new provisions of the limits for 3 attempts, we have seen an increase in the pass rates at the college end. So we've seen a fairly significant jump in the number of individuals passing with these restrictions in place. And of course, we don't have data on why that is, but we have seen an improvement in pass rates amongst our members with this new rule for 3 attempts.
Yeah, I did look at your data. I will kind of commend you. Your jurisdiction are performed pretty well. Like in the 6 years data, you have kind of over 80% passing rate, no matter during pandemic 3 years or before. So your jurisdiction is one of the strong jurisdiction.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So some of the we have only I think about 10 more minutes left of time to set aside for today. But I did see some questions regarding you know, you'd mentioned that one of the myths and things you wanted to address was the concern around cost. Some did raise some of the concerns around cost and wondered what they can do in regards to if they are facing financial hardship in taking an examination. And what's the appropriate role for, if any, for a college or a regulatory body or even an examination body to consider that? And I don't know who to pose that to first. You know, I think that there are some solutions available to people that are planning to take examinations and are concerned about costs, especially if they have to take it a number of times. But is there any kind of available programs that anybody's aware of where they can point them to? Because I don't believe it's necessarily an appropriate place to ask the examination body to consider financial hardship, or even the regulatory body necessarily, but maybe you're aware of places they can go if they're having that concern.
Well, oh, okay, I'll let Mariann, I'll go, okay. You know, what our commitment is, and the college, we routinely survey our peers across Canada about costs and about examination rates and registration rates, application rates for these kinds of issues. And we are definitely, I would say, in the middle of the pack in terms of cost across Canada. Now, of course, each region has their own demands, cost of living, and so there are variables simply to do that. But we routinely look at our costs. But with the implementation of the Part 2, CAP is going to do that dive again into our costs to see if there are some areas that we can reduce the costs. And we're looking at our jurisprudence exam in particular to see if we can reduce that cost of that examination, because we did realize some savings. So members can probably look at that exam as possibly being reduced in cost, but prior to the adoption of the EPPP Part 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I'm not aware of an entity right now where individuals can go to for assistance. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I do want to add just one little tidbit. It's not really completely exam related, but there could be many people on the call today who are students and who are looking for information. And there is a resource at ASPPB on our website. 2 years ago, we, through a federal grant, we worked on developing a publication called the In Focus. And the In Focus document really lays out what are requirements for jurisdictions for licensure. It's always printed a year behind. So the document that's on the website right now is about 21. We're working on 22 information right now. And of the 65 jurisdictions, 50 responded. But I would encourage you all, if you're interested in looking about not only Alberta's requirements, because Alberta did respond. Thank you, Dr. Spellacy. I think it's a really good tool, and you can access that at ASPPB.CENTRE.org. I'll put that in the chat box also. But again, that's ASPPBCENTRE.org. And it's another resource tool to be able to learn more information about various jurisdictions.
And I'd just like to add to Mariann's comment, I see that the CAP Monitor edition authored by Dr. Jansen on the EPPP has been added to the chat box as well, so members can go and access that article for further information.
Thank you, Dr. Spellacy, for noting that. I think it's Kathy Semchuk who found that reference for us, and one other person also posted it, so that thank you for finding that. The last sort of question, and a number have commented about second language to English and test taking, and you know, maybe perception that is there a disadvantage for, say, internationally trained where English is a second language in taking the EPPP, and then maybe what suggestions there might be to sort of address concerns they might have around that issue.
So I will say just a few things, and then Dr. Song, I'll let you come in with the real information. I will say that the item writers go through some significant training in prep of writing questions related to linguistics and language semantics, and that is part of the training. We do provide the test in English. but we also have a French version based on the legal requirement of a couple of the territories there in Canada. So I'll mention that. Dr. Song, I'll let you add anything additional to that.
Thank you. So we do closely monitor to see, in addition, kind of the training of item writer, try not to use kind of a very specific language or term to prevent any possible difficulty to certain or non-native English speakers. But we are monitor the performance differences using the diff method and some other method. We closely monitor comments. If students saying this is a very kind of a English specific or Canadian specific terms, we will know. So in terms of, I saw in the chat saying whether provide accommodation for ESL, that's a jurisdiction decision. I see a couple consider to give them a little longer time, not double time, but maybe half an hour longer. But that's a jurisdiction by jurisdiction decision.
Yes, and that's correct, Hao, that we do give people accommodations for ESL. That said, we do have English language requirements for those who are not trained in the English language, and that simply is a public safety issue, that if they are offering services to the public, they have to have a reasonable command of the English language, but we do make accommodations in terms of time for those who are trained in a different language.
Well, excellent. I want to really thank the presenters for their time and their willingness to kind of present to all of those who were able to attend today. I wonder if there some closing remarks would be available from Dr. Spellacy to thank our presenters. I did note that in the chat that there was a link to the next town hall meeting, which I'll just set you up there, Dr. Spellacy, to note that we are having another one later in March. But I wanted to thank you personally for your willingness to field questions and to be available to answer those. Thank you very much.
Well, I would also personally like to thank Mariann and Hao for coming on today and answering these questions. I'm really proud that ASPPB, like the college, is a learning organization, that we are constantly evolving, constantly striving to do better. And so I'm particularly pleased with the leadership at ASPPB because they are open to these types of difficult conversations and willing to examine how we can do better. And that's certainly true for the College of Alberta Psychologists. So thank you again, Mariann and Hao. I would like to again note that in the chat box is a link to the upcoming town hall with Dr. Monica Williams, who's a board certified licensed clinical psychologist and associate professor at the University of Ottawa in the School of Psychology, where she is the Canada Research Chair in Mental Health Disparities. And she will be presenting on equity, diversity, and inclusion, psychologists tearing down barriers and building allies. That's on March 27th from 12 noon to 2 p.m. And we hope that all of you who were here today will be able to join us on March 27th. So thank you very much, Mariann, Hao, and Dr. Jansen. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, and we are available at any time.